Let's start. MTC 2303 number 18. It was a pleasure meeting you at your gallery last week. I appreciate your effort to select and exhibit diverse artwork. As I mentioned, I greatly admire Robert D. Parker's paintings, which emphasize the beauty of nature. Robert D. Parker. Over the past few days, I have been researching and learning about Robert D. Parker's online viewing room through your gallery's website. Robert D. Parker. I'm especially interested in purchasing the painting that depicts the horizon, titled Sunrise. Sunrise. I would like to know if the piece is still available for purchase. It would be a great pleasure to house this wonderful piece of art. I look forward to your reply to this inquiry. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 2303 number 19. On opening day, Isabel arrives at the cafe very early with nervous anticipation. Isabel. She looks around the cafe, but she can't shake off the feeling that something is missing. As she sets out cups, spoons, and plates, Isabel's doubts grow. Isabel. She looks around, trying to imagine what else she could do to make the cafe perfect, but nothing comes to mind. Then, in a sudden burst of inspiration, Isabel grabs her paintbrush and transforms the blank walls into landscapes, adding flowers and trees. Isabel. As she paints, her doubts begin to fade. Looking at her handiwork, which is beautifully done, she is certain that the cafe will be a success. Now, success is not exactly guaranteed, she thinks to herself, but I'll definitely get there. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 2303 number 20. The more people have to do unwanted things, the more chances are that they create unpleasant environment for themselves and others. If you hate the thing you do but have to do it nonetheless, you have choice between hating the thing and accepting that it needs to be done. Either way you will do it. Doing it from place of hatred will develop hatred towards the self and others around you. Doing it from the place of acceptance will create compassion towards the self and allow for opportunities to find a more suitable way of accomplishing the task. If you decide to accept the fact that your task has to be done, start from recognizing that your situation is a gift from life. This will help you to see it as a lesson in acceptance. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 2303 number 21. Everyone's heard the expression, don't let the perfect become the enemy of the good. If you want to get over an obstacle so that your idea can become the solution-based policy you've long dreamed of, you can't have an all-or-nothing mentality. You have to be willing to alter your idea and let others influence its outcome. You have to be okay with the outcome being a little different, even a little less, than you wanted. Say you're pushing for a Clean Water Act. Even if what emerges isn't as well funded as you wished, or doesn't match how you originally conceived the bill, you'll have still succeeded in ensuring that kids in troubled areas have access to clean water. That's what counts, that they will be safer because of your idea and your effort. Is it perfect? No. Is there more work to be done? Absolutely. But in almost every case, helping move the needle forward is vastly better than not helping at all. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 2303 number 22. Brands that fail to grow and develop lose their relevance. Think about the person you knew who was once on the fast track at your company, who is either no longer with the firm or, worse yet, appears to have hit a plateau in his or her career. Assuming he or she did not make an ambitious move, more often than not, this individual is a victim of having failed to stay relevant and embrace the advances in his or her industry. Think about the impact personal computing technology had on the first wave of executive leadership exposed to the technology. Those who embraced the technology were able to integrate it into their work styles and excel. Those who were resistant many times found few opportunities to advance their careers and in many cases were ultimately let go through early retirement for failure to stay relevant and update their skills. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 2303 number 23. What consequences of eating too many grapes and other sweet fruit could there possibly be for our brains? A few large studies have helped to shed some light. In one, higher fruit intake in older, cognitively healthy adults was linked with less volume in the hippocampus. This finding was unusual, since people who eat more fruit usually display the benefits associated with a healthy diet. In this study, however, the researchers isolated various components of the subjects' diets and found that fruit didn't seem to be doing their memory centers any favors. Another study from the Mayo Clinic saw a similar inverse relationship between fruit intake and volume of the cortex, the large outer layer of the brain. Mayo Clinic. Researchers in the latter study noted that excessive consumption of high-sugar fruit, such as mangoes, bananas, and pineapples, may cause metabolic and cognitive problems as much as processed carbs do. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 24. Winning turns on a self-conscious awareness that others are watching. It's a lot easier to move under the radar when no one knows you and no one is paying attention. You can mess up and be rough and get dirty because no one even knows you're there. But as soon as you start to win, and others start to notice, you're suddenly aware that you're being observed. You're being judged. You worry that others will discover your flaws and weaknesses, and you start hiding your true personality, so you can be a good role model and good citizen and a leader that others can respect. There is nothing wrong with that. But if you do it at the expense of being who you really are, making decisions that please others instead of pleasing yourself, you're not going to be in that position very long. When you start apologizing for who you are, you stop growing and you stop winning. Permanently. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 26. British photographer Julia Margaret Cameron is considered one of the greatest portrait photographers of the 19th century. Julia Margaret Cameron 19. Born in Calcutta, India, into a British family, Cameron was educated in France. Calcutta Cameron. Given a camera as a gift by her daughter in December 1863, she quickly and energetically devoted herself to the art of photography. 186312. She cleared out a chicken coop and converted it into studio space where she began to work as a photographer. Cameron made illustrative studio photographs, convincing friends and family members to pose for photographs, fitting them in theatrical costumes and carefully composing them into scenes. Cameron. Criticized for her so-called bad technique by art critics in her own time, she ignored convention and experimented with composition and focus. Later critics appreciated her valuing of spiritual depth over technical perfection and now consider her portraits to be among the finest expressions of the artistic possibilities of the medium. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 29. Human beings like certainty. This liking stems from our ancient ancestors who needed to survive alongside saber-toothed tigers and poisonous berries. Our brains evolved to help us attend to threats, keep away from them, and remain alive afterward. In fact, we learned that the more certain we were about something, the better chance we had of making the right choice. Is this berry the same shape as last time? The same size? If I know for certain it is, my brain will direct me to eat it because I know it's safe. And if I'm uncertain, my brain will send out a danger alert to protect me. The dependence on certainty all those millennia ago ensured our survival to the present day, and the danger alert system continues to protect us. This is achieved by our brains labeling new, vague, or unpredictable everyday events and experiences as uncertain. Our brains then generate sensations, thoughts, and action plans to keep us safe from the uncertain element, and we live to see another day. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 30. Robert Blattberg and Stephen Hodge noted that, in a changing environment, it is not clear that consistency is always a virtue and that one of the advantages of human judgment is the ability to detect change. Robert Blattberg, Stephen Hoke. Thus, in changing environments, it might be advantageous to combine human judgment and statistical models. Blattberg and Hodge examined this possibility by having supermarket managers forecast demand for certain products and then creating a composite forecast by averaging these judgments with the forecasts of statistical models based on past data. Blattberg-Hoke. The logic was that statistical models assume stable conditions and therefore cannot account for the effects on demand of novel events such as actions taken by competitors or the introduction of new products. Humans, however, can incorporate these novel factors in their judgments. The composite or average of human judgments and statistical models proved to be more accurate than either the statistical models or the managers working alone. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 31. Free play is nature's means of teaching children that they are not helpless. In play, away from adults, children really do have control and can practice asserting it. In free play, children learn to make their own decisions, solve their own problems, create and follow rules, and get along with others as equals rather than as obedient or rebellious subordinates. In active outdoor play, children deliberately dose themselves with moderate amounts of fear and they thereby learn how to control not only their bodies, but also their fear. In social play, children learn how to negotiate with others, how to please others, and how to manage and overcome the anger that can arise from conflicts. None of these lessons can be taught through verbal means, they can be learned only through experience, which free play provides. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 32. Many early .com investors focused almost entirely on revenue growth instead of net income. Many early .com companies earned most of their revenue from selling advertising space on their websites. To boost reported revenue, some sites began exchanging ad space. Company A would put an ad for its website on Company B's website, and Company B would put an ad for its website on Company A's website. AB, BA. No money ever changed hands, but each company recorded revenue, for the value of the space that it gave up on its site, and expense, for the value of its ad that it placed on the other company's site. This practice did little to boost net income and resulted in no additional cash inflow, but it did boost reported revenue. This practice was quickly put to an end because accountants felt that it did not meet the criteria of the revenue recognition principle. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 33. Scholars of myth have long argued that myth gives structure and meaning to human life, that meaning is amplified when a myth evolves into a world. A virtual world's ability to fulfill needs grows when lots and lots of people believe in the world. Conversely, a virtual world cannot be long sustained by a mere handful of adherents. Consider the difference between a global sport and a game I invent with my 9 friends and play regularly. 9. My game might be a great game, one that is completely immersive, one that consumes all of my group's time and attention. If its reach is limited to the 10 of us, though, then it's ultimately just a weird hobby, and it has limited social function. 10. For a virtual world to provide lasting, wide-ranging value, its participants must be a large enough group to be considered a society. When that threshold is reached, psychological value can turn into wide-ranging social value. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 34. It seems natural to describe certain environmental conditions as extreme, harsh, benign, or stressful. It may seem obvious when conditions are extreme, the midday heat of a desert, the cold of an Antarctic winter, the salinity of the Great Salt Lake. But this only means that these conditions are extreme for us, given our particular physiological characteristics and tolerances. To a cactus there is nothing extreme about the desert conditions in which cacti have evolved, nor are the icy lands of Antarctica an extreme environment for penguins. It is lazy and dangerous for the ecologist to assume that all other organisms sense the environment in the way we do. Rather, the ecologist should try to gain a worm's eye or plant's eye view of the environment, to see the world as others see it. Emotive words like harsh and benign, even relativities such as hot and cold, should be used by ecologists only with care. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 35. Human processes differ from rational processes in their outcome. A process is rational if it always does the right thing based on the current information, given an ideal performance measure. In short, rational processes go by the book and assume that the book is actually correct. Human processes involve instinct, intuition, and other variables that don't necessarily reflect the book and may not even consider the existing data. As an example, the rational way to drive a car is to always follow the laws. However, traffic isn't rational. If you follow the laws precisely, you end up stuck somewhere because other drivers aren't following the laws precisely. To be successful, a self-driving car must therefore act humanly, rather than rationally. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 36. Like positive habits, bad habits exist on a continuum of easy to change and hard to change. When you get toward the hard end of the spectrum, note the language you hear: breaking bad habits and battling addiction. It's as if an unwanted behavior is a nefarious villain to be aggressively defeated. But this kind of language, and the approaches it spawns, frames these challenges in a way that isn't helpful or effective. I specifically hope we will stop using this phrase, break a habit. This language misguides people. The word break sets the wrong expectation for how you get rid of a bad habit. This word implies that if you input a lot of force in one moment, the habit will be gone. However, that rarely works, because you usually cannot get rid of an unwanted habit by applying force one time. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 37. A common but incorrect assumption is that we are creatures of reason when, in fact, we are creatures of both reason and emotion. We cannot get by on reason alone since any reason always eventually leads to a feeling. Should I get a whole grain cereal or a chocolate cereal? I can list all the reasons I want, but the reasons have to be based on something. For example, if my goal is to eat healthy, I can choose the whole grain cereal, but what is my reason for wanting to be healthy? I can list more and more reasons such as wanting to live longer, spending more quality time with loved ones, etc., but what are the reasons for those reasons? You should be able to see by now that reasons are ultimately based on non-reason such as values, feelings, or emotions. These deep-seated values, feelings, and emotions we have are rarely a result of reasoning, but can certainly be influenced by reasoning. We have values, feelings, and emotions before we begin to reason and long before we begin to reason effectively. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 38. Electric communication is mainly known in fish. The electric signals are produced in special electric organs. When the signal is discharged, the electric organ will be negatively loaded compared to the head and an electric field is created around the fish. A weak electric current is created also in ordinary muscle cells when they contract. In the electric organ, the muscle cells are connected in larger chunks, which makes the total current intensity larger than in ordinary muscles. The fish varies the signals by changing the form of the electric field or the frequency of discharging. The system is only working over small distances, about 1 to 2 meters. 1-2. This is an advantage since the species using the signal system often live in large groups with several other species. If many fish send out signals at the same time, the short range decreases the risk of interference. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 39. Creativity can have an effect on productivity. Creativity leads some individuals to recognize problems that others do not see, but which may be very difficult. Charles Darwin's approach to the speciation problem is a good example of this. He chose a very difficult and tangled problem, speciation, which led him into a long period of data collection and deliberation. This choice of problem did not allow for a quick attack or a simple experiment. In such cases, creativity may actually decrease productivity, as measured by publication counts, because effort is focused on difficult problems. For others, whose creativity is more focused on methods and technique, creativity may lead to solutions that drastically reduce the work necessary to solve a problem. We can see an example in the development of the polymerase chain reaction, PCR, which enables us to amplify small pieces of DNA in a short time. DNA, PCR. This type of creativity might reduce the number of steps or substitute steps that are less likely to fail, thus increasing productivity. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 40. A young child may be puzzled when asked to distinguish between the directions of right and left. But that same child may have no difficulty in determining the directions of up and down or back and front. Scientists propose that this occurs because, although we experience 3 dimensions, only 2 had a strong influence on our evolution, the vertical dimension as defined by gravity and, in mobile species, the front/back dimension as defined by the positioning of sensory and feeding mechanisms. These influence our perception of vertical versus horizontal, far versus close, and the search for dangers from above, such as an eagle, or below, such as a snake. However, the left-right axis is not as relevant in nature. A bear is equally dangerous from its left or the right side, but not if it is upside down. In fact, when observing a scene containing plants, animals, and man-made objects such as cars or street signs, we can only tell when left and right have been inverted if we observe those artificial items. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 2303 number 4142. Creative people aren't all cut from the same cloth. They have varying levels of maturity and sensitivity. They have different approaches to work. And they're each motivated by different things. Managing people is about being aware of their unique personalities. It's also about empathy and adaptability, and knowing how the things you do and say will be interpreted and adapting accordingly. Who you are and what you say may not be the same from one person to the next. For instance, if you're asking someone to work a second weekend in a row, or telling them they aren't getting that deserved promotion just yet, you need to bear in mind the individual. 2. Vincent will have a very different reaction to the news than Emily, and they will each be more receptive to the news if it's bundled with different things. Vincent Emily. Perhaps that promotion news will land easier if Vincent is given a few extra vacation days for the holidays, while you can promise Emily a bigger promotion a year from now. Vincent, Emily 1. Consider each person's complex positive and negative personality traits, their life circumstances, and their mindset in the moment when deciding what to say and how to say it. Personal connection, compassion, and an individualized management style are key to drawing consistent, rockstar level work out of everyone. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 2303 number 4345. It was a hot day in early fall. Wilder was heading to the school field for his first training. Wilder. He had just joined the team with 5 other students after a successful tryout. Approaching the field, he saw players getting ready, pulling up their socks and strapping on shin guards. But they weren't together. New players were sitting in the shade by the garage, while the others were standing in the sun by the right pole. Then Coach McGraw came and watched the players. McGraw. Coach McGraw, too, saw the pattern, new kids and others grouping separately. McGraw. This has to change, he thought. He wanted a winning team. To do that, he needed to build relationships. I want you guys to come over here in the middle and sit, he called the players as he walked over. You. McGraw roared, pointing at Wilder. McGraw. Wilder. Come here onto the field and sit. And Johnny. You sit over there. Johnny. He started pointing, making sure they mixed together. Wilder realized what Coach was trying to do, so he hopped onto the field. Wilder. McGraw continued to point, calling each player out, until he was satisfied with the rearrangement. McGraw. Okay, this is how it's going to be, he began. We need to learn how to trust and work with each other. This is how a team plays. This is how I want you to be on and off the field, together. The players looked at each other. Almost immediately, McGraw noticed a change in their postures and faces. McGraw. He saw some of them starting to smile. Wow, thought Wilder. Wilder. From his new location on the grass, he stretched out his legs. He liked what he was hearing. A new sense of team spirit came across him, a deeper sense of connection. It was encouraging to hear Coach talk about this, to see him face the challenge head-on. Now his speech was over. The players got up and started walking on the field to warm up. Good job, Coach. That was good, Wilder said to McGraw in a low voice as he walked past him, keeping his eyes down out of respect. Wilder McGraw, ... MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 2303 number 18. Morganic Corporation, located in the heart of Arkansas, spent the past decade providing great organic crops at a competitive price, growing into the 9th leading organic farming operation in the country. Arkansas Morganic Corporation 10. As a seasoned writer with access to Richard Taylor, the founder and president of Morganic, I propose writing a profile piece on Taylor for your magazine. Morganic Richard Taylor, Taylor. I believe the time has come to cover Morganic's rise in the organic farming industry. Morganic. The piece would run in the normal 800 to 1,200 word range with photographs available of Taylor and Morganic's operation. Taylor Morganic 800-1,200. Thank you for your consideration of this article. I hope to hear from you soon. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 2303 number 19. Mark was participating in freestyle swimming competitions in this Olympics. Mark. He had a firm belief that he could get a medal in the 200 m. 200. Swimming was dominated by Americans at the time, so Mark was dreaming of becoming a national hero for his country, Britain. Mark. That day, Mark was competing in his very last race, the final round of the 200 m. Mark 200. He had done his training and was ready. 1 minute and 50 seconds later, it was all over. 150. He had tried hard and, at his best, was ranked number 4. 4. He fell short of a bronze medal by 0.49 of a second. 0.49. And that was the end of Mark's swimming career. Mark. He was heartbroken. He had nothing left. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 20. There is no denying that engaging in argument carries certain significant risks. When we argue, we exchange and examine reasons with a view toward believing what our best reasons say we should believe. Sometimes we discover that our current reasons fall short, and that our beliefs are not well supported after all. Or sometimes we discover that a belief that we had dismissed as silly or obviously false in fact enjoys the support of highly compelling reasons. On other occasions, we discover that the reasons offered by those with whom we disagree measure up toe-to-toe with our own reasons. In any of these situations, an adjustment in our belief is called for. We must change what we believe, or revise it, or replace it, or suspend belief altogether. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 21. Thanks to the power of reputation, we help others without expecting an immediate return. If, thanks to endless chat and intrigue, the world knows that you are a good, charitable guy, then you boost your chance of being helped by someone else at some future date. The converse is also the case. I am less likely to get my back scratched, in the form of a favor, if it becomes known that I never scratch anybody else's. Indirect reciprocity now means something like, if I scratch your back, my good example will encourage others to do the same and, with luck, someone will scratch mine. By the same token, our behavior is endlessly shaped by the possibility that somebody else might be watching us or might find out what we have done. We are often troubled by the thought of what others may think of our deeds. In this way, our actions have consequences that go far beyond any individual act of charity, or indeed any act of mean-spirited malice. We all behave differently when we know we live in the shadow of the future. That shadow is cast by our actions because there is always the possibility that others will find out what we have done. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 22. When you experience effect without knowing the cause, you are more likely to treat effect as information about the world, rather than your experience of the world. The psychologist Gerald L. Clore has spent decades performing clever experiments to better understand how people make decisions every day based on gut feelings. Gerald L. Clore. This phenomenon is called affective realism, because we experience supposed facts about the world that are created in part by our feelings. For example, people report more happiness and life satisfaction on sunny days, but only when they are not explicitly asked about the weather. When you apply for a job or college or medical school, make sure you interview on a sunny day, because interviewers tend to rate applicants more negatively when it is rainy. And the next time a good friend snaps at you, remember affective realism. Maybe your friend is irritated with you, but perhaps she didn't sleep well last night, or maybe it's just lunchtime. The change in her body budget, which she's experiencing as affect, might not have anything to do with you. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 23. Whenever possible, we should take measures to re-socialize the information we think about. The continual patter we carry on in our heads is in fact a kind of internalized conversation. Likewise, many of the written forms we encounter at school and at work, from exams and evaluations, to profiles and case studies, to essays and proposals, are really social exchanges, questions, stories, arguments, put on paper and addressed to some imagined listener or interlocutor. There are significant advantages to turning such interactions at a remove back into actual social encounters. Research demonstrates that the brain processes the same information differently, and often more effectively, when other human beings are involved, whether we're imitating them, debating them, exchanging stories with them, synchronizing and cooperating with them, teaching or being taught by them. We are inherently social creatures, and our thinking benefits from bringing other people into our train of thought. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number. 24. Every day an enormous amount of energy is created by the movement of people and animals, and by interactions of people with their immediate surroundings. This is usually in very small amounts or in very dispersed environments. Virtually all of that energy is lost to the local environment, and historically there have been no efforts to gather it. It may seem odd to consider finding ways to collect energy that is given off all around us by people simply walking or by walking upstairs and downstairs or by riding stationary/exercise bicycles, for example, but that is the general idea and nature of energy harvesting. The broad idea of energy harvesting is that there are many places at which small amounts of energy are generated and often wasted, and when collected, this can be put to some practical use. Current efforts have begun, aimed at collecting such energy in smaller devices which can store it, such as portable batteries. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number. 26. Georgy Gauss was born in Moscow, Russia. Georgy Gauss. He was admitted to Moscow State University, where he received his undergraduate degree in 1931 and PhD in 1940. 1931-1940. Prior to achieving his doctoral degree, Gauss published his ecological classic, The Struggle for Existence, in 1934, and in English. Gauss 1934 The Struggle for Existence. This book and similar research papers in the 1930s helped lay the early foundation for population ecology and indeed fostered the introduction of mathematics into the historical development of ecology. 1930. In ecology, Gauss's contributions are equally acknowledged along with those of other early ecologists who studied population dynamics. Gauss. However, most ecologists are not aware that Gauss eventually went on to conduct very important research on antibiotics and somewhat left ecology behind. Gauss. From 1960 until his death he was director of the Institute of Antibiotics he and his wife had founded. 1960. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number. 29. From the 8th to the 12th century CE, while Europe suffered the perhaps overdramatically named Dark Ages, science on planet Earth could be found almost exclusively in the Islamic world. 812. This science was not exactly like our science today, but it was surely antecedent to it and was nonetheless an activity aimed at knowing about the world. Muslim rulers granted scientific institutions tremendous resources, such as libraries, observatories, and hospitals. Great schools in all the cities covering the Arabic Near East and Northern Africa, and even into Spain, trained generations of scholars. Almost every word in the modern scientific lexicon that begins with the prefix al owes its origins to Islamic science: algorithm, alchemy, alcohol, alkali, algebra. Al. And then, just over 400 years after it started, it ground to an apparent halt, and it would be a few hundred years, give or take, before what we would today unmistakably recognize as science appeared in Europe with Galileo, Kepler, and, a bit later, Newton. 400. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number. 30. In centuries past, we might learn much about life from the wisdom of our elders. Today, the majority of the messages we receive about how to live a good life come not from Granny's long experience of the world, but from advertising executives hoping to sell us products. If we are satisfied with our lives, we will not feel a burning desire to purchase anything, and then the economy may collapse. But if we are unsatisfied, and any of the products we buy actually delivers the promised lasting fulfillment, subsequent sales figures may likewise drop. We exist in a fog of messaging designed explicitly to influence our behavior. Not surprisingly, our behavior often shifts in precisely the manner intended. If you can be made to feel sufficiently inferior due to your yellowed teeth, perhaps you will rush to the pharmacy to purchase whitening strips. The lack of any research whatsoever correlating tooth shade with life satisfaction is never mentioned. Having been told 100 times a day how to be happy, we spend much of our lives buying the necessary accoutrements and feeling disappointed not to discover life satisfaction inside the packaging. 100. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number. 31. The quest for knowledge in the material world is a never-ending pursuit, but the quest does not mean that a thoroughly schooled person is an educated person or that an educated person is a wise person. We are too often blinded by our ignorance of our ignorance, and our pursuit of knowledge is no guarantee of wisdom. Hence, we are prone to becoming the blind leading the blind because our overemphasis on competition in nearly everything makes looking good more important than being good. The resultant fear of being thought a fool and criticized therefore is one of greatest enemies of true learning. Although our ignorance is undeniably vast, it is from the vastness of this self-same ignorance that our sense of wonder grows. But, when we do not know we are ignorant, we do not know enough to even question, let alone investigate, our ignorance. No one can teach another person anything. All one can do with and for someone else is to facilitate learning by helping the person to discover the wonder of their ignorance. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 32. Lewis Williams believes that the religious view of hunter groups was a contract between the hunter and the hunted. Lewis Williams. The powers of the underworld allowed people to kill animals, provided people responded in certain ritual ways, such as taking fragments of animals into the caves and inserting them into the membrane. This is borne out in the San. Like other shamanistic societies, they have admiring practices between human hunters and their prey, suffused with taboos derived from extensive natural knowledge. These practices suggest that honoring may be one method of softening the disquiet of killing. It should be said that this disquiet needn't arise because there is something fundamentally wrong with a human killing another animal, but simply because we are aware of doing the killing. And perhaps, too, because in some sense we know what we are killing. We make sound guesses that the pain and desire for life we feel our worlds of experience have a counterpart in the animal we kill. As predators, this can create problems for us. One way to smooth those edges, then, is to view that prey with respect. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 33. The empiricist philosopher John Locke argued that when the human being was first born, the mind was simply a blank slate, a tabula rasa waiting to be written on by experience. John Locke, tabula rasa. Locke believed that our experience shapes who we are and who we become, and therefore he also believed that, given different experiences, human beings would have different characters. Locke. The influence of these ideas was profound, particularly for the new colonies in America, for example, because these were conscious attempts to make a new start and to form a new society. The new society was to operate on a different basis from that of European culture, which was based on the feudal system in which people's place in society was almost entirely determined by birth, and which therefore tended to emphasize innate characteristics. Locke's emphasis on the importance of experience in forming the human being provided an optimistic framework for those trying to form a different society. Locke. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 34. In A Theory of Adaptation, Linda Hutcheon argues that an adaptation is not vampiric, it does not draw the lifeblood from its source and leave it dying or dead, nor is it paler than the adapted work. A Theory of Adaptation, Linda Hutcheon. It may, on the contrary, keep that prior work alive, giving it an afterlife it would never have had otherwise. Hutcheon's refusal to see adaptation as vampiric is particularly inspiring for those of us who do work on adaptations. Hutcheon. The idea of an afterlife of texts, of seeing what comes before as an inspiration for what comes now, is, by its very definition, keeping works alive. Adaptations for young adults, in particular, have the added benefit of engaging the young adult reader with both then and now, past and present functioning as both monuments to history and the flesh of the reader's lived experience. While this is true for adaptations in general, it is especially important for those written with young adults in mind. Such adaptations allow young readers to make personal connections with texts that might otherwise come across as old-fashioned or irrelevant. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 2303 number 35. According to the principle of social proof, one way individuals determine appropriate behavior for themselves in a situation is to examine the behavior of others, their especially similar others. It is through social comparison with these referent others that people validate the correctness of their opinions and decisions. Consequently, people tend to behave as their friends and peers have behaved. Because the critical source of information within the principle of social proof is the responses of referent others, compliance tactics that employ this information should be especially effective in collectivistically oriented nations and persons. Some evidence in this regard comes from a study showing that advertisements that promoted group benefits were more persuasive in Korea, a collectivistic society, than in the United States, an individualistic society. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 32303 number 36. Aristotle explains that the good for human beings consists in eudaimony, a Greek word combining eu meaning good with daimon meaning spirit, and most often translated as happiness. Eudaimony, eu daimon. Whereas he had argued in a purely formal way that the good was that to which we all aim, he now gives a more substantive answer, that this universal human goal is happiness. However, he is quick to point out that this conclusion is still somewhat formal since different people have different views about what happiness is. Some people say it is worldly enjoyment while others say it is eternal salvation. Aristotle's theory will turn out to be naturalistic in that it does not depend on any theological or metaphysical knowledge. It does not depend on knowledge of God or of metaphysical and universal moral norms. It depends only on knowledge of human nature and other worldly and social realities. For him it is the study of human nature and worldly existence that will disclose the relevant meaning of the notion of eudaimony. Eudaimony. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 32303 number 37. A large body of research in decision science has indicated that one attribute that is regularly substituted for an explicit assessment of decision costs and benefits is an effective valuation of the prospect at hand. This is often a very rational attribute to substitute. Affect does convey useful signals as to the costs and benefits of outcomes. A problem sometimes arises, however, when effective valuation is not supplemented by any analytic processing and adjustment at all. For example, sole reliance on effective valuation can make people insensitive to probabilities and to quantitative features of the outcome that should affect decisions. One study demonstrated that people's evaluation of a situation where they might receive a shock is insensitive to the probability of receiving the shock because their thinking is swamped by effective evaluation of the situation. People were willing to pay almost as much to avoid a 1% probability of receiving a shock as they were to pay to avoid a 99% probability of receiving a shock. 1.99. Clearly the effective reaction to the thought of receiving a shock was overwhelming the subject's ability to evaluate the probabilities associated. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 32303 number 38. The linguistic resources we choose to use do not come to us as empty forms ready to be filled with our personal intentions, rather, they come to us with meanings already embedded within them. These meanings, however, are not derived from some universal, logical set of principles, rather, as with their shapes, they are built up over time from their past uses in particular contexts by particular groups of participants in the accomplishment of particular goals that, in turn, are shaped by myriad cultural, historical, and institutional forces. The linguistic resources we choose to use at particular communicative moments come to these moments with their conventionalized histories of meaning. It is their conventionality that binds us to some degree to particular ways of realizing our collective history. However, while our resources come with histories of meanings, how they come to mean at a particular communicative moment is always open to negotiation. Thus, in our individual uses of our linguistic resources we accomplish two actions simultaneously. We create their typical historical contexts of use and at the same time we position ourselves in relation to these contexts. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 32303 number 39. Going beyond very simple algorithms, some AI-based tools hold out the promise of supporting better causal and probabilistic reasoning in complex domains. Humans have a natural ability to build causal models of the world, that is, to explain why things happen that AI systems still largely lack. For example, while a doctor can explain to a patient why a treatment works, referring to the changes it causes in the body, a modern machine learning system could only tell you that patients who are given this treatment tend, on average, to get better. However, human reasoning is still notoriously prone to confusion and error when causal questions become sufficiently complex, such as when it comes to assessing the impact of policy interventions across society. In these cases, supporting human reasoning with more structured AI-based tools may be helpful. Researchers have been exploring the use of Bayesian networks and AI technology that can be used to map out the causal relationships between events, and to represent degrees of uncertainty around different areas, for decision support, such as to enable more accurate risk assessment. Bayesian networks. These may be particularly useful for assessing the threat of novel or rare threats, where little historical data is available, such as the risk of terrorist attacks and new ecological disasters. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 32303 number 40. The rise of large, industrial cities has had social consequences that are often known as urbanism. The city dissolves the informal controls of the village or small town. Most urban residents are unknown to one another, and most social interactions in cities occur between people who know each other only in specific roles, such as parking attendant, store clerk, or customer. Individuals became more free to live as they wished, and in ways that break away from social norms. In response, and because the high density of city living requires the pliant coordination of many thousands of people, urban societies have developed a wide range of methods to control urban behavior. These include regulations that control private land use, building construction and maintenance, to minimize fire risk, and the production of pollution and noise. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 32303 number 4142. Douglas Hofstadter is a scholar who writes about stereotypical thinking. Douglas Hofstadter. He discusses what he calls default assumptions. Default assumptions are preconceived notions about the likely state of affairs, what we assume to be true in the absence of specific information. Given no other information, when I mention secretary, you are likely to assume the secretary is a woman, because woman and secretary are associated stereotypically. In the absence of specific details, people rely on the stereotype as a default assumption for filling in the blanks. Default assumptions have a tendency, in Hofstadter's words, to permeate our mental representations and channel our thoughts. Hofstadter. For instance, given the words cat, dog, and chases, you are likely to think first of a dog chasing a cat. This line of thought reflects a default assumption that, all else being equal, the dog is more likely to chase the cat than the other way around. Default assumptions are rooted in our socially learned associative clusters and linguistic categories. They are useful in that people cannot always afford the time it would take to consider every theoretical possibility that confronts them. Nonetheless, default assumptions are often wrong. Default assumptions are only one type of language-based categorization. Hofstadter is particularly interested in race-based and gender-based categorization and default assumptions. Hofstadter. For instance, if you hear that your school basketball team is playing tonight, do you assume it's the men's team? Most people would assume so unless a qualifier is added to provide specific information. In this case, the qualifier would be the women's basketball team is playing tonight. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 32303 number 4345. Now I will tell you a story. There lived a young boy named Nick. Nick. He would sing and whistle nearly all day. He was as merry as a lark. One day Nick went out taking a walk in the forest, at some distance from his home. Nick. When he reached a clear stream he felt very thirsty and bent down to drink water. But, just at that moment, he was suddenly seized and found himself in the hands of a fierce giant, 100 times bigger than himself. For some time the giant held Nick in his big hands, and looked at him with great delight. Nick. He then put him into a large bag, and carried him away. Poor Nick, who was in great fear, did all he could do to escape from his cruel captor. Nick. He tried to tear the bag, but the giant only laughed at him. At last, the giant came to his own house with a high wall all around it, and no trees, nor flowers. He put Nick into a prison. Nick. It was quite a dark room, with iron bars all around it. Nick was very miserable, for he had never before been deprived of his liberty. Nick. He dashed backward and forward in his prison house, but he could not escape. He thought of his own pleasant home, his companions, the sunlight, the trees, and the flowers. He screamed and tried to get out between the iron bars, but he only tore himself, and all in vain. In a moment, the giant came again to the prison. He told Nick to sing, the same as he did when he was in his own home. Nick. Sing. 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 Said he, why don't you sing? But Nick was too sad to sing. Nick. Who could sing in a prison? At length the giant grew very angry, and took Nick out of the prison to make him sing. Nick. He shook him, and then ordered him to sing. Nick felt terrified while missing whatever he enjoyed with freedom at his home. Nick. Now I will tell you who they were. Nick was a little bird and that giant was a cruel boy. Nick. MTC. Good job.